welcome to Patron Saints of Pop Culture Podcast. As always, I am your co-saint, Miguel Covarrubias.
And I am Kathy Covarrubias. And today, let's talk about Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle.
So if you have not yet seen the movie, it did come out late last year, and it is available for rent now. It has been a few months, but as you would know, if you're a frequent listener, we do not often get a chance to go out and see movies right when they come out. We did take a special day to go see Avengers: Infinity War, but this one was kind of lower on our list of priorities.
Yep, exactly.
So, spoiler alert still, though, if you have not yet seen it.
Yep. And I guess we want to go ahead and do our review and summary.
Review and summary.
Summary first.
Summary. Well, as like Star Wars, let's see, what is it? The Force Awakens. It very much is like the older version of the movie, which is the original Jumanji, where a kid gets stuck in a game for 20 years, and newer kids come along and start playing the game. They all have their own parent issues, and they deal with it while playing the game.
Yep. That sounds about right.
Yeah, that's my summary.
Okay. My summary, older teen 20 years ago gets stuck in a video game, and then other teens who are in detention, which is a typical teen trope, end up playing a game together, and then they get into a jungle, and then they get out of the jungle.
Shenanigans ensue.
One thing led to another.
And a teenage girl is in love with a 30-year-old man, which is weird.
Yeah, which was really weird. I was like, oh God, I hope she realizes how weird this is. But it didn't seem like it. She did. So yeah, that's part of my review.
All right. So my review, I actually really enjoyed the movie, and I did like the tongue-in-cheek, self-aware kind of take that they took on the usual pop culture tropes.
Yeah.
I really did. I did like that, even though it did take us about 4 hours to watch a 2-hour movie because we kept having to stop and start because of our toddler. I did enjoy the movie. I thought it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I was. Are you done? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no.
Okay. I was a little skeptical because I don't know. A lot of these remakes of the older movies, I was like, eh. Like, I can see where it was entertaining, but I was kind of skeptical. It didn't really look too good to me. But then a lot of my other nerd friends were like, oh no, like it's a lot better than you would expect it to be. And I'm like, okay, I guess I'll watch it when it comes out on video. And I did. And I was pleasantly surprised. I mean, I would probably rewatch it like maybe once or twice after today and never watch it ever again. But
maybe in a few years just to remember, oh yeah, Jumanji used to scare the crap out of me. Let's watch it again as adults.
Yeah, something like that. But yeah, so it was entertaining. I enjoyed the entertainment value. I don't know what else to say. It was entertaining. I would give it a solid B is what I would give it.
Well, I mean, The Rock those are his strengths. I don't know how he is with a boomerang, but he does have that intense smoldering or whatever it was.
I mean, if The Rock is your type.
Well, I'm just saying that he just has that presence on screen.
Sure.
He just kind of eats up the scenery when he's ever on screen.
I would agree to disagree on that. Like, I just don't find he definitely has like only children movie acting chops. You know what I mean? Like, it's very surface level stuff at this point in time. Like, I don't see him getting too much deeper.
I think he has some acting skills, but he's given those things which are more comedic because that's where his strengths lie.
Sure.
Okay. Really, I thought that the film did a wonderful job of kind of reiterating the point of what the podcast is about. And I think this is what I really, because I think it's really the main theme is really how we tend to find ourselves in pop culture, and not just in pop culture, but in narrative. Mm-hmm. And I think this is kind of one of the major themes, especially because of what the principal says at almost the beginning of the movie to the kids who are in detention, is that who you are, finding out who you are right here in this moment and who you want to be. And I think this is essential to not just that detention period. And I don't know if he realized that they were going to find Jumanji and find themselves in Jumanji in the detention time. But I think this was essential to kind of the character progression for each of the characters in this film, is that they were learning who they were and how that interacted with the world in a different world, mm-hmm. in something far removed from where they actually were. And I think this is very true of how we as society truly view narrative and alternate lives, as it were. And I don't know about you, but for me, whenever I read a book, or I watch a movie, or I play a game, that I really become kind of that main character. And it's a part of me that I'm like, I can see a lot of what that main character sees, because it's, I'm finding bits of myself in that character.
Well, yeah, and I think it's also easy because a lot of the narrative, whether it be a book, a TV show, a video game, like, if it's good writing, you're going to get yourself, like, caught up in the scene. Like,
oh, yeah.
Like, I don't know about you guys, but, like, I have very vivid memories of reading certain books that I love, and then, like, imagining, like, having vivid images of certain scenes in the book.
Well, I think it has a lot to do with, I know that it's not just for me, but for a lot of people who are a bit of bibliophiles, that when they hear an action being, like, how they say in a book, like, this character, like, slyly smirks or something else like that, that you actually do that yourself just to kind of try it on a little bit.
Sure.
Come on, you do this too.
Okay. I mean, it's been a long time since I actually, like,
or listen to a book, or listen to a story.
It's been a really long time. I'm more of a podcast person.
Well, you just listened to a book, like, not that long ago, like a few months ago. Like a book series. Oh, yeah,
that's true. But, I mean, I guess I would. I mean, I don't watch myself read a book, so I guess I wouldn't. I wouldn't say that I don't do it. I just don't notice that I do it.
Okay. But I think that for a lot of us, it's just a part of that, seeing ourselves in other lives. And this is what we talked about in our very first episode, all the way back in December of 2016 when we first started doing this.
That's too long ago.
Is we talked about how each of these pieces of pop culture, each of these stories, each of these narratives, that there are other worlds, that we pull from these other worlds, that we go to these other worlds in a sense, mm-hmm. and we find bits of ourselves in those things, and we pull back some of those principles that we find in those things. That's the whole reason why we do the show, is that we do the show to help to pull back pieces of the principles that are inherent in these parables of pop culture.
Well, and this actually, like, goes back to why it's so important to read to, like, toddlers and infants.
Yeah.
Is because even at a very young age, kids start picking up the lessons in the books.
Well, this is something that it goes all the way back to Socrates and Plato. It's a very Platonic kind of philosophy, is that narrative and storytelling is very essential to the development of behavior. of how we as human beings interact with the world around us, with each other, and with even ourselves. And I think it's also very important to note this because, honestly, when we were trying to figure out what we were going to actually talk about today, we were going to go back to what we had on our schedule, which was Westworld, the first episode of season 2, which, quite honestly, I can't really pull out the themes quite yet, which is why I was like, oh, dear Lord, what are we going to talk about?
Well, no, because it was all just setup work.
Yeah, and so I was trying to think, well, maybe we should just go back and do a refresher of what the show's actually about. And so when we popped in this movie, thinking, oh, okay, this will just be another delay of what we have on our schedule. I was watching and I'm like, this is exactly what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about a refresher of why we do this, of what makes me excited every time I watch a movie, every time I listen to a book, or I listen to a podcast, or I watch a television show, or I listen to any kind of story, because there's a whole lot of different ways of storytelling. And in fact, we did a music video last week. So, that even in itself is a lot of storytelling. That was densely packed storytelling.
Yeah. So what you're saying is you understand why the characters, kind of bringing it back in, like why they ended up having some character development, because they became the character, like the original 4 teens became the characters that they were set up to play.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where I was going. But thank you for the transition. It's very much the stories that we digest that end up becoming who we are, and I think it's very much true in that idiom of "you are what you eat." And I think this is very much true with the stories that we digest. Is we choose what we want to digest. We choose what we actually kind of finish, and I think this is very true with some of those video games that you don't really ever finish. That you're just kind of like, I didn't really like the story. It didn't really draw me in. I didn't really want to digest this. And I think this would have been true had Jumanji not been a very did not actually pull you into the game. Where they probably would have gotten bored with it after a few minutes and went back to pulling the staples out of the magazines, which, by the way, they never finished. That bothers me a little bit. That
they never finished pulling the
staples out of the magazine.
I don't think that the principal ever intended them to do the whole 2 bins. Do you know how long that would take? I think this is just menial work, and he didn't know what else to give them, so he was like, just do this.
Yeah, okay. But this is, I think, also essential in the stories that we tell. And I think this is when, talking about this afterwards is how we tell that with their lives. Is that you saw the kind of the denouement for them was they actually hung out together. They actually realized the good in each other. Mm-hmm. That they kind of realized in themselves, the characteristics that they brought to the character of Bravestone, of Mouse, of Dr. Shelley, whatever his name was, and Ruby Roundhouse, and the pilot guy.
I thought you wrote down the names.
I did write down their names, their real names: Spencer, Fridge, Bethany, Martha, and Alex. But, and I think this is very essential to us as human beings, is that we pull from those stories those pieces that we liked, and we kind of discard those things we didn't like. For instance, and we'll talk about this here a little bit later, but right now I'm in a book series called The Magicians by Les Grossman. Anyway, I'll check it out later. But the point of these stories is, I don't really like the main character all that much, but there are some qualities in him that he discovers about himself throughout the entire thing that I'm like, okay, I can see that in myself, and I can see how I can be better about doing that, and how I can discover that in myself as well. Mm-hmm. And I think this is very true in the movie, where each of these characters kind of learn that about not only themselves, but the world around them in a way. And I think this is true how we interact with the news media and the stuff that we consume on a day-to-day basis. Is if we believe that, everything is just fake news, and so that's the way we're going to see the world, is that we end up throwing facts out the window because, we believe what we've been told or whatever. and so it's very much how we live, how the stories we digest, and how we pull out from those stories these principles in the parables.
And I'd like to point out too, one of the things that I like about them making Jumanji into a video game is because it's true. I mean, there are still groups out there who are like really into board games. I mean, for a while there, we were really into board games.
I'm still really into board games. I just don't have anybody to play with.
And for teens, a lot of them, I mean, there are still teens even who play board games, but a lot now play video games. And with the video games, especially the ones that I tend to play, the RPGs, they a lot of the times will allow you to decide what type of character you're going to be, like whether it be evil or good, or if you're going to be more middle of the road. And so I kind of like those games because it kind of like...
Well, the classic D&D layout or the grid of how good and lawful you are.
Yeah, but with the video games, you kind of get to... Like, I don't know about you guys, but whenever I would play a game, I would be like, okay, I'm going to do like my truest, like I'm going to be good. Like I'm going to be good in this game first time around. And when I play it, I am good. Second time around, I always try to be as evil as I can be. But I always feel so bad. Like when I'm trying to be evil, I always feel gross and shady and just icky. So, so I have learned through video games that that's just not my nature, I guess, to be gross and shady and evil.
Yeah, I did that with Fallout 3. Is I did a second playthrough with a character that was evil, and I couldn't like just go around stealing things. I ended up killing like the entire like cities. Rivettown was completely like empty of any character afterwards because I killed them all. Because like they caught me stealing, and I'm like, oh well, I'm just gonna kill everybody now.
Well, but then how did that make you feel afterwards? Did you feel accomplished? Like
I couldn't keep playing that character.
It just wasn't you.
Yeah.
And one of the themes that kind of like drew me in a little bit more with Jumanji, you know, I guess 2.0, because it is a sequel, because
yes.
it does pick up, you know, where the old one came, like, you know, why.
Even though I thought it washed ashore in France, not in America.
They could have played it in France and threw it back into the ocean and it traveled back. You don't know.
I don't know.
It's been around the world a few times. But with the character of Bethany, like it is clear that her lesson that she needed to learn was that the world does not revolve around her. Mm-hmm. And like from the very beginning scenes that we see of her, one, like she's trying to make the perfect selfie, like staging herself and then posting it. Oh, look, just rolled out of bed. Good morning. Like, no, you didn't just roll out of bed. Like you got up, you did your makeup, you did your hair, like you laid back down, you staged your room, and then you took the picture. No, you did not just get up. Mm-hmm. But that's the narrative that she chose to put online, which was false. And I do have to say though, like we can't really fault her for being that way at the beginning, because as humans, as a human society, we've always leaned more towards being selfish, towards self-promotion, towards tooting our own horn, I guess.
Well, and I would also argue it wasn't just her. She was just the most obvious.
Yeah.
And I think that all of the characters in their own ways were selfish. And I think this comes about even with Spencer's crush on Martha, is that he was very selfish in it. Mm-hmm. And he treated it very selfishly. And it wasn't until he finally kind of left some of that behind and said, you know, what about your feelings? What about you? Mm-hmm. And that he really discovered, you know, the truth about that. But that's, you know, I'm just arguing the point that everybody was selfish.
Oh, yeah. Well, and even Martha was selfish. Like, did she really feel that way about Jim? Or was she just trying to, you know, tell her gym teacher a BS reason as to why she shouldn't have to participate?
Yeah.
You know? Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, I feel like since we've always been selfish, like we've always, like everybody has that innate, like self-preservation I guess, tool that nature has given us. I don't know what else you would call it. Intuition, maybe, or structure. But our phones and social media have definitely made it more prevalent, like more like in your face type deal. Because we know most of those Instagram accounts, most of everybody's Instagram accounts are only the nice version of your life or the staged version of your life. I mean, how many times have you wanted to, taken a picture of something in your life and wanted to post it to social media, but you take a couple of different pictures of it, choose the best one, and then you post it on social media. I mean, that itself right there is kind of being a little untrue.
It's the curated version of your life.
Exactly. Yeah. I guess the more, not necessarily fancy, but the one that you want to portray to others, like your online self, not your real self. And there definitely is a difference. Definitely. There are people that I know who like interact with their online friends like it's no big deal, but then as soon as they meet their online friends in real life, like they just like clamp down and it's like super awkward and like they can't like have a conversation. Just like what do you think like causes that? Like why is it because that they are afraid that they're going to be found out of like their online persona?
Well, I would say yes and also no. But it's mainly yes, that fear that they're going to be found out, that well, and that's the way that we are with everybody, even when we meet people in real life, is that we're afraid to let too much of ourselves show. And I think this is very true with that interaction between Martha and Bethany, was that I'm afraid, like, are you afraid of me? When they were doing that whole thing, was that, yes, they were afraid of each other. They were afraid of each other because of these certain things. They're afraid of that somebody else is going to hate them, or that they're going to dislike them. And so we end up disliking somebody first, so that we can get the preemptive attack, as it were.
Yeah, kind of shield yourself.
Yeah.
Like, if I hate you, then if you hate me, it won't hurt so bad. Yeah. Kind of a deal. And I feel like along with social media making it easier to put your own narrative of your life instead of the true narrative of your life up for everybody to see, I feel like it also kind of slows self-growth as well too. Because we're only putting like the very top layer, like the very, just the very edge of our real life. Like we're not showing any depth to actually what's going on. And that's why when people posts, quote unquote, real posts, like it blows up, like the internet loves it. It's because no one ever shows what really happens. Like,
or they tell people that you're oversharing, or like, and this is because, and I think a lot of it is because people are, they don't want real getting mixed up with their, fantasy life.
Yeah, well, I feel like people just really want like very baseline emotions. I feel like sometimes people are afraid to express some emotional intelligence. And so that's why they only want like the puppies and the roses and the sunshine. They don't want to see the scars and the darkness and the sadness.
Or those posts on Facebook that are just a post. Like a literal post.
I just roll my eyes. I'm like, you're not funny. You're not the first one.
Yeah. It was funny the first time.
It was funny the first time.
Yeah, it's done.
And yeah, now I'm over it. But I also find that because especially like in the our generation, the millennial generation, the generation below us, because we have become adults with social media, that it has made it hard to actually get the emotional intelligence, and it's making it harder to actually sympathize, I find. I know of a handful of people, both in my work life and my personal life, who they are obsessed with like making sure they're up to date on everybody's social media accounts. Like they are constantly posting like their own pictures. They're constantly posting stuff about themselves online. Always, putting a filter on there, but claiming there's no filter. We all know those people. And when they come into contact with people who are in need of real sympathy and are needing of just honestly, they just need some help. They tend to just close them off. Like they don't want to deal with it because it's not the happier stuff.
Yeah.
And they almost get angry at them. Like, how dare you come to me and ask for help? How dare you, like, put this negativity on my life?
Yeah.
Like, by showing me, like, your true self. Like, I know there's just one specific person that I have worked with where every time a customer came to her with a problem, she was like, I don't understand why this is so hard for them to understand. And I'm like, because they don't live this every day, like they don't know. So you got to build a little bit of sympathy and kind of understand where they're coming from. And she's like, well, I can't do that. I can't expect them to think that I can do that.
Well, and I'll come to my defense of that here in a minute.
Oh, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about...
No,
Okay.
I'm playing a little bit of devil's advocate for that.
Okay.
Is that oftentimes we get so worn down,
Yeah,
because of those things and because of being mistreated that that we can't really pull out that sympathy or that empathy anymore, because it's like we've already spent it all, and we've already been hurt by those who we did try to give empathy to, and we did try to give sympathy to. And I think this is a state of our country right now, to bring it kind of more into today's parlance, is that we don't want to have conversations right now. Mm-hmm. We don't want to see the real world, because honestly, the real world sucks right now, and we don't want to deal with that. And so when people are needing more than ever somebody to sit down and just see the real them, is that we can't really engage with them because we feel spent. We feel completely just emptied of all of that because of all that we are dealing with our own personal self.
But the problem with that is we do need to have more emotional intelligence. I feel like that's also the problem with what's going on too, is because if we are so spent, even those of us who have like strong emotional intelligence, like I am one of those people, like you walk into the room, I can almost tell you how you're feeling. Like I can tell you when you're being phony to me. I can tell you when you're trying to hide like an emotion from me, whatever that emotion may be. I can tell that you're trying to hide something. And I feel like that skill isn't sought for or sought after anymore because of the fact that we have put a screen in between us to where we can't practice emotional intelligence anymore. Like if there's a screen in front of us, mm-hmm. we can't see their facial. Like they can say something, but it's hard for us to understand what they're really, like how they're really feeling when they're saying that sentence because we can't see them or we can't hear them.
Yeah.
Well,
and I think that reading tone is much more difficult when it's just words or it's mm-hmm. just a picture.
Yeah.
Along with words in social media. And that in that point, yes. But I also feel like you can also be your truer self because you don't have those masks that you built up.
I don't know. I'm a very sarcastic person. It's hard for me not to be sarcastic in typing, and I know that people take it the wrong way.
That's why I've always...
that's why...
I preface things now as I put sarcasm in parentheses after it.
But I almost find that a little snooty. Like I don't expect you to, be smart enough to pick up on my sarcasm.
No, it's more or less so that you know that I'm being sarcastic.
Oh, I know that that's what you're feeling. I'm just saying that, like, when it's somebody that's not you who is doing that, like, I almost like... Did you not think I was going to pick up on your sarcasm? Do you think I'm stupid? Like...
No, I just want to make it very clear that I don't actually believe this.
That's why I think that your job with what you do is so much harder than mine, because I can hear their tone. Like, I can hear when they're being sarcastic. Yeah. I can hear when they're being, like, snooty or rude, even if it's supposed to be a nice phrase. I can hear that in their voice. So I think it's easier for me for what I do, because then I can, I guess, change up what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And with us losing the ability to like exercise our emotional intelligence, it's almost as if our community keeps breaking down. Part of the good things about emotional intelligence is the fact that it helps build community and keep the community strong. And when you can't exercise that and understand what people are saying, it definitely puts up walls and pushes people away. And I have a problem with that.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
And especially with what's going on now. I feel like that's part of the problem with trolls too, is because, I mean, they try to get you in with your emotions and then you get worn down and then you can't function with somebody who is actually trying to have a conversation with you.
Well, and I can understand how you would see that, but I also feel like, in defense of online communities and social media, is that it does allow for trolls to actually to get into the mix. But I also think that it does allow for building of community in a way, is that because you don't have the same masks that or the same boundaries that you do in physical interaction.
We just, in all communities though, online, in person, we just got to be sure that we stay away from groupthink, because that's where it can cause other kinds of problems. But that's that's another story for a different day. And we really do need emotional intelligence to survive as a species. That's why we are like dominating the earth right now. If we did not have emotional intelligence, we would not have been able to actually live in hunter-gatherer communities in order to build that up to then be in a small town. I mean, it takes a lot of stress and a lot of work to live with people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, if the human species were loners, it honestly would, be a little bit easier life in terms of emotional wise, but you'd probably die a lot sooner. So because you don't have those people to protect you. So that's why emotional intelligence is important to us as a species. And that's why we developed it, is because it helped put us on the pedestal, as it will, in terms of the animal kingdom. And I just want to, I know we've talked a lot about why, showing your emotions are good and being your true authentic self, and why emotional intelligence is good, and why you should try to learn that and pick up emotions from other people. But what can you do to try to expand your world in order to make you a better, emotional guru? Make people more comfortable with showing them, or showing you who they really are.
Well, I think that's
And what can you do to help show who you really are?
Well, I think empathy is a big thing in that, but it's also a lot harder to do if you don't have those social skills. And I think this comes down to an introvert versus extrovert kind of thing. Is that those who are more extroverted, yeah, it'll be easier for them to do that. It would be easier for them to expand their world. But here I'm going to defend online communities again. Is that
I'm not trying to go after online communities. I'm just saying that when it comes to social media in general, all aspects, people tend to put, even in online communities, they'll put more about what they want people to see and not what the real life are.
Yes. More or less. And I would say that there are some that do that, but I don't think that's a default narrative of how people interact with social media nowadays. And I think that's a common misconception that is also hindering to the building of online communities of any community as well.
Well, I don't know. You've never been in mom groups.
Well, okay. But it is to expand one's world. A lot of it is finding that way of one, finding yourself, finding out who you are in that moment, and being able to display that to the world. It helps you to be able to let others do that, allow others to be themselves around you. And this is something that, I could tell you from my youth ministry training, is that that's a lot of what we were taught in my college days, in my classes, was you got to be yourself. You got to show them that you care, because otherwise they don't care. Mm-hmm. They're not going to be themselves. The teenagers aren't going to be themselves. They're not going to be who they are. They're not going to be able to learn any of the spiritual stuff, because they don't really care. They're just there because their parents want them to be there. Instead, if you show them that you actually do care about their lives, that you really do care about how they interact with the world, then they're going to be able to interact with you in a much deeper and much more spiritual level, as it were. And I think this is very true in this, is that through the game they were able to understand themselves, and then they were able to understand how that fits into the larger world as a whole, as a grander context.
I wonder if maybe we can put something, because I know there's already like video chats and that kind of stuff. Maybe as part of our online communities, we should try to put more into video conferencing for those groups.
Yeah.
I know it's harder for some groups than others, but maybe that will help too, because then we can at least, get a better feel for who the person actually is, instead of like their online persona. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we have a lot of principles that we actually pulled out from this parable. We did have some concrete kind of conversation on this, so that's good. Even though we didn't exactly agree with some of those things, which is good.
But
makes for better conversation.
We don't have to agree on everything.
No, we don't.
This is life lesson number 1.
So the first one is where I am. Here's our tagline for our show here: we overanalyze pop culture so that you don't have to.
This was definitely overanalyzing. Like, not gonna lie. I'm sure listeners are going to agree.
Okay, yes, we did overanalyze Jumanji, but I think that these themes are quite evident in the movie.
Oh, it's evident. We just really
overanalyze them?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's what we do. That's why we have a show.
Yep.
And also, building a sense of self helps to build a sense of the world around you. Mm-hmm. Those are the principles that we talked about today. In closing, we're gonna do something different, because I think that our calendar was a little restrictive to us, because we as parents, we realize that scheduled lives don't really happen the way that they're scheduled.
But as always, 3 weeks out, we'll do a Black Mirror episode.
Probably.
As always. It'll just keep pushing out.
But instead of doing a calendar, doing a schedule of what we're actually going to be doing, is we're going to talk about what we've been watching and what we've been thinking about. Just to also give a shout out to those podcasts that we listen to, and to the things that we listen to, or the things that we're watching. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, right now we're working our way through Westworld season 2.
Yep.
We're watching season 2 of Handmaid's Tale, which we had to take a week off because
stuff.
Yeah, we felt drained this week, and we didn't have enough empathy to give to Offred and everyone else in that show.
Yep.
We are trying to figure out how we're going to be able to watch Legion sooner rather than later. And for me, I'm working my way through Lev Grossman's The Magician's book series, mm-hmm. and I'm sure that eventually we'll start watching the television series that is based on those books, which I'm actually really enjoying it because I love C.S. Lewis so much. You could tell that he did too. And this is kind of a little bit of his homage to that and Harry Potter and a lot of those other magical fantasy books. So I highly recommend for those of you who have not picked up the books. I have not yet watched the television series, so we'll get to that eventually, I'm sure. But those are the things that I'm watching and I'm that are kind of on my mind at the moment, besides Divinity Original Sin, which we're still working our way through.
Yep. I am not reading or listening to anything
Podcasts?
besides podcasts. I did wanted to mention that we have been watching Timeless, and Timeless episodes are either really, really good or they're okay.
Yeah.
And one of the episodes that I really enjoyed was actually this season, and it was when it was the early NASCAR one. And the podcast of Stuff You Missed in History Class is actually doing a 2-part episode on that driver because he is so interesting. And even you were like, as I was listening to it at lunch the other day, you were even like, oh,
Yeah.
I guess you're like listening to parts of it. I mean, his life is interesting. I don't have my cell phone up here, so I can't tell you what his name is, but I'm sure it just
Stuff You Missed in History Class is the podcast that you're recommending.
Yep. And of course, I mean, Harry Potter and the Sacred Text.
All right.
Do I have to tell you why?
So if you have any feedback about these things or what we should actually be listening to or watching or reading or anything else like that, give us feedback. And the way you can do that is you can find us on social media. We are on Facebook, we are on Twitter, and all popular major social media platforms. You can also find us and listen to us, review us, and share us on most podcast platforms. Please do so because we really love having you guys listen to us overanalyze pop culture for you. We're doing it for you and for science a little bit.
And for science.
And you can also find us on our website, thehonestfaith.com. The email address is on there as well. You can also give us a call or send us a text at 720-372-3879. Again, that is 720-372-3879. So with all of that being said, we invite you to come and join the conversation.
Bye.